In Egg Harbor Township, next to Home Depot. Get out of that old car, truck, or SUV and into a brand new Nissan. The all-new Matt Blatt Nissan on the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township. Or visit us online, mattblattnissan.com.
South Jersey's home for the Sixers and Flyers.
Yeah! He scores! A two-hand jam!
97.3 ESPN, WENJ, WENJ HD, Millville, Atlantic City, a Town Square media station. This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios.
What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Less than 24 hours to the NBA trade deadline, less than a week to the Super Bowl, and the Flyers are back on the ice tonight. All that and more coming up here on Game Night, here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig hanging out with you in the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Kevin Durso, our Flyers Insider journalist, is coming up at 6:40. Flyers return to the ice from the All-Star break at 6:40 tonight. Is Kevin Durso. Flyers drop the puck after 7. Tim Saunders, Steve Coates on the call on 97.3 ESPN FM and on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Speaking of the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Seattle City, of course, you can DM the show through the app. You can also text it at 609-403-0973. So we are, as I mentioned at the top, we're under 24 hours to the deadline. And this Ben Simmons stuff is just getting absolutely bonkers. And it's getting to a point where I don't know if anybody really has the full truth and nothing but the truth. But I think that we have to admit that where there's smoke, there is fire. And I'm not going to sit here and be one of these people who's going to act like I have it all figured out, nor am I going to act like the person who is going to act like this stuff is or isn't legitimate. But Brian Windhorst, who is one of those guys who he's not the dude who goes out there and like just puts stuff out there for clicks. Brian Windhorst is the guy who reports when he actually has legitimate material. You know, he's not one of these guys who's constantly being fed information and then he, is like putting it out there to get clicks or get attention or get YouTube views or whatever platform. So for Windhorst to say what he said today on Greeny here on 97.3 ESPN this morning really stood out to me. And this specific cut I want to start with because, for those who didn't get to hear Windhorst on Greeny's show this morning, to me, this is one of the bigger points of contention. And I don't think this is a thing that I've heard anyone suggest or overtly deny. And this is Brian Windhorst this morning on 97.3 ESPN.
I can't tell you how much James Harden wants this.
Really?
And because he basically, you got to be very careful using the Q word or saying whatever, but his actions over the last 10 days are basically a threat to the Nets.
Think about that. Harden wants out, and his actions recently, he's basically threatening them, okay? He's basically saying, look, I'm going to be a malcontent. I am going to make things difficult until further notice. Just think about that concept. I haven't seen a single report denying that Harden, there's nobody out there reputable who's saying Brian Windhorst is lying. James Harden wants to be a Brooklyn Net. Everything is good up there in Brooklyn. And then Windhorst goes on to expound upon it by saying this.
James Harden, until he hurt his hamstring in a game in the first quarter last spring and had to leave the game in the first quarter, he had scored in double figures in 400 50 consecutive games. He's one of the greatest scorers in NBA history. He then, after that happened, he got healthy from that. He then had a streak of 44 consecutive games. Last week in Sacramento, he played 37 minutes and scored 4 points. Okay? That doesn't even articulate the effort level he gave on defense in that game. And then he basically shut it down for the rest of that road trip.
This gets back directly to the articles in The Athletic by Shams Charania and Sam Amick that have talked about that Harden went to Brooklyn under the pretense that the situation was going to be different than it's been. Now, he can't blame it all on Brooklyn, obviously, okay? Part of the problem is all this COVID stuff, all these protocols, the Kyrie situation, that's all out of his control. But the injuries are out of their control as well. All of these guys, Durant, Harden, Kyrie, at different points in the last couple of years have been injured during their time with the Brooklyn Nets. And it seems like Harden is like, you know what? I didn't sign up for this. Now, I understand Harden didn't literally sign up for it, okay? He was traded, but he forced his way out of Houston. There's a vibe now that he has basically put the Brooklyn Nets in between a rock and a hard place.
He is screaming in every way he possibly can, I don't want to be here, get me out of here, just like he did in Houston. And so what the real issue is here for the Nets is not the consequences of making this deal. It's the consequences of not making this deal. If they don't do this trade, what is James Harden going to do the rest of the season? And then, of course, what is he going to do when he becomes a free agent in the summer? That's what has spurred this into being.
The consequences of not making a deal. That's some heavy stuff right there. Because that is basically Brian Windhorst opening the Pandora's box. Whether James Harden is traded or not in the next 18, 16 hours before the trade deadline tomorrow afternoon, to me, it's less about Harden than it is about the Nets. This situation in Brooklyn was put together with the express purpose and the express idea that Harden and Kyrie and Kevin Durant were going to unite, and it was going to be one of the greatest collaborations of star power in NBA history. And the handful of games the three have played together, they have been incredible. But they barely have played together. Harden and Durant have barely played with Kyrie. Kyrie's barely played with the other two. And the three of them together, it's been rare. And Harden, according to Brian Windhorst, is like, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to be here. And it sounds like, oh, Harden's just a cranky guy. He's miserable. He doesn't want to be there. But the other part of what Windhorst said to me is the part that really is scary for Brooklyn. Okay? Because this is more than just Harden saying, I don't want to be here. This is more than Harden saying, I don't want to be a part of this. Listen to this part about the relationship of Harden, Durant, and Kyrie from Greeny this morning on 97.3 ESPN NBA insider Brian Windhorst.
Durant is aligned with Kyrie. He was aligned with Kyrie when he got there, and he remains aligned with Kyrie. And Harden is not. Last year, Harden and Kyrie really worked hard to fit together. You could see it on the court. You could hear it when they talked about it. They were 16-3 playing together last year when Durant was out. They really tried to work. That is over. The Harden-Irving relationship ain't working. Harden is basically, written it on his chest if you've been paying attention. And Durant remains, believe, that he and Kyrie can do this. And so I suspect that will result in Harden being gone, whether it's this week or this summer.
Think about the depth of what he just said. First of all, Durant has aligned himself with Kyrie. That in and of itself tells you why Harden feels like he doesn't want to be in Brooklyn anymore. Because when Harden played with Chris Paul, or when he played with Russell Westbrook, and when they had Carmelo down there for a hot second in Houston, and the different guys that came in and out of the Rockets organization, all of those guys looked to Harden like, hey, man, I'm here with you. We're going to go down together. We're going to fight, and it may not always work, and I may not always get along with you, but I got your back. This makes it sound like it's Kyrie and Durant's team, and Harden is just another dude on the roster. And I don't think Harden has any interest in being the third wheel in this relationship. All right. Harden, this isn't like other NBA, trios we've seen over the years. When it was LeBron and Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh was the obvious third guy. When it was Jordan and Pippen in Chicago, the third guy, whether it was Rodman or whether it was Horace Grant, it was obvious that guy was the third guy. When it was Durant who went to Golden State via free agency, Durant and Steph were the former MVP award winners. Draymond and Clay purposefully took a step back to make the Durant fit even better. There's numerous examples of trios where it's obvious who the Batman and the Robin is, and then the third and fourth guys are the third and fourth guys. Harden is like none of the dudes I have named. Harden is on a different level than Klay Thompson. He has a completely different resume than Chris Bosh. He is not Ray Allen getting up there in years. He is not, Kevin Love in a LeBron Kyrie situation in Cleveland. I can keep giving examples, but the point is, this is an MVP of the NBA. James Harden, most people believe, is one of the 3 to 5 greatest scorers to ever walk on an NBA basketball court. James Harden has a Hall of Fame resume if he retired right now and never played another game. 7-time first team All-NBA. He was the 6th man of the year in OKC, 9-time All-Star. He's won the MVP. The dude has a resume that dwarfs every other third wheel of a super team in the last 30 years, let's go with, okay? But yet, Durant and Kyrie are basically like, hey, we're in this with each other and together, and Harden's just the other dude. And as Windhorst pointed out, Harden worked hard, no pun intended, to make this work. He was like, look, I'll be the point guard. I'll take less shots. Kyrie, you be the shooting guard. For lack of a better explanation in the offense. Durant, you're the number one scorer. We're going to make this work. And now Harden's playing all these games without Kyrie for half of them. Durant's injured. And he's looking around at Patty Mills and Claxton and these other guys. And he's like, I didn't sign up for this. Now, again, part of this is out of his control. It's out of the Nets' control. But the reason why this deal looks like it could be real and it could be alive is because of the reality of James Harden's malcontent nature toward this entire environment, toward this entire situation. Just having a complete disinterest in dealing with this situation anymore. Now, I'm not saying that Harden should come to Philadelphia if he were to come to Philadelphia and just be, the greatest player ever. I'm not saying that Harden is still that guy who, led the league in scoring year in and year out and was an MVP award winner. But I don't think Harden wants to be that guy either. I think Harden, what was appealing about the Nets, what's appealing about going to Philadelphia potentially, is he doesn't have to be the guy. So for the Sixers and the Nets, whatever stage of the process they're in, whether you want to believe Windhorst, who says that that they're in the deal zone, right? Whether you want to believe a person like Adrian Wojnarowski, who says, look, a deal is not particularly imminent right now. Whether you want to believe Shams Charania when he says that, the Sixers have talked to multiple teams trying to make the Harden deal potentially happen. There's a lot of speculation out there to different platforms that the Sixers are shopping potentially Tobias Harris and other players so they can get what they need to make the Harden deal work. There's speculation that the Sixers have basically told the Nets that Maxey is off the table. There is a ton of variables out there. But the one thing that we know for sure is that right here, right now, the Nets and the Sixers have to make a decision. For the Nets, they need to decide, is it worth it for them to hang on to Harden and hope the rest of the season works out, whether he leaves or not in free agency? And for the Sixers, they need to decide if James Harden is worth it for them to go chips to the middle of the table. Because right now, if you were to make this deal, you are trading with a team that is also contending in the same conference as you. This is the rub for both of these teams. The Sixers are 32-22. The Nets are 29-25. You give the Nets Ben Simmons in a trade. You are taking a poor Nets defensive unit and upgrading them. The Nets have one of the worst defensive everything across the board. Points allowed per game, field goal shooting, three-point shooting, all kinds of numbers. It's just against them. They don't have the roster to compete if any of those guys are not available for a playoff run. You give them Ben Simmons, they become a team that is all of a sudden able to play defense, able to compete in the East at a much higher level. And for the Sixers, getting Harden turns them from being a team that is second round and out to potentially being one of the favorites in the Eastern Conference. So could potentially be a win-win for both teams, but do both teams want to help the other potentially face each other in the Eastern Conference Finals? Again, a lot of variables, a lot of things to think about. Love to hear what you guys think. We're going to talk more about this, not just tonight, but of course for the next 20 plus hours, because the NBA trade deadline is tomorrow afternoon. Josh Hennig hanging out with you in the Matt Black Kia studios. As always, you can text in at 609-403-0973. You can DM the show through the 973 ESPN mobile app. Thanks to First Bank of Seattle City. And speaking of trades, Kevin Durso, our Flyers Insider, will join us coming up in about 20 minutes. And part of the reason why I wanted Durso to come on the show today is because Claude Giroux was the MVP of the NHL All-Star Game. The NBA trade deadline is tomorrow. In a few weeks is the NHL trade deadline. Ben Simmons might not be the only all-star player traded out of Philadelphia in the next few weeks. Ben Simmons may be gone in the next 20 hours, and Claude Giroux may be gone in the next 20 days. So we got a lot to get to Again, we'll hear from you guys throughout the hour. Text board is 609-403-0973. You also can DM the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Thanks to First Bank of Seattle City. I'm Josh Hennig, and this is Game Night.
It's Sixers basketball Friday night on 97.3 ESPN with the voice of the 76ers, Tom McGinnis, calling all the exciting play-by-play action.
Maxey versus Perez into the lane. Tyrese puts it up. It is Tyrese Maxey. Oh, yeah.
The Sixers host the Oklahoma City Thunder. Coverage begins at 7 p.m. Philadelphia 76ers basketball on your radio home of the Sixers in South Jersey. 97.3 ESPN.
With GMF financing excludes Corvette. Now till the end of the month, Bennett Chevrolet is paying a minimum $8,000 for any trade. No joke. That's $8,000 minimum for any rundown old piece of junk you can get to our lot. Don't let that clunker just sit around. Have it towed to Bennett and get at least $8,000 towards any pre-owned vehicle in stock. But this is a special offer this month only. Got a good trade? Bring it in. Because if we're paying a minimum $8,000 for junk, imagine how much more Bennett will pay for a good quality trade. And we'll buy your vehicle even if you don't buy ours. Plus, you won't find Bennett selling new cars over factory window sticker like other dealers. And if you're stuck in a lease, we can get you out early. Every make and model. No obligation, no pressure. Because our non-commissioned sales staff is paid on your satisfaction, not how much you spend. Now till the end of the month, Bennett Chevrolet is paying a minimum $8,000 for any trade. Find new roads at Bennett Chevy, Egg Harbor Township, and BennettChevy.com.
Heard you're buying a car. I brought my calculator.
Dad, I already used Capital One Auto Navigator. I found my car online and got pre-qualified instantly, instead of all that.
You know those things impact your credit score.
Didn't impact my credit score, Dad. Now I'm going to the dealership for a test drive and to make the purchase.
Sounds too easy.
No, it's just easy. Capital One, what's in your wallet?
Terms and conditions apply. Find out more at CapitalOne.com/Auto Navigator.
Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack, but not with ZipRecruiter. Its powerful technology actively finds and invites qualified candidates to apply to your job. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you the needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/free. That's ZipRecruiter.com/free.
If you suspect you have mold in your home, water damage in your basement or crawl space, or a foundation problem, call Perfect Basement. If you're selling your home, address the problems before your buyer discovers them. Perfect Basement provides free, no-pressure inspections for waterproofing, mold remediation, and foundation repair. They're family-owned in South Jersey, licensed and certified, and accredited by the Better Business Bureau. Visit perfectbasement.com and check out their exclusive price guarantee and great reviews. That's perfectbasement.com.
Have you wanted to speak a new language but thought it'd be too difficult or take too much time? Then try Babbel. In just 15 minutes a day, Babbel teaches you conversations that you will actually use. With 14 languages and lesson topics like travel, business, relationships, and more, you'll learn what matters most to you. Babbel. Language for life. Learn a new language with ease. Go to Babbel.com to try for free. That's BABBEL.com.
Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $700 on average, and those savings add up. Imagine what you could buy in the future.
So yeah, I used the savings from switching to Progressive 50 years ago to finally buy my dream car. It's a self-driving flying car, but we just say self-flying now. You know, because it's the future, and cars fly in the future.
So switch to Progressive and save big, because those savings can add up in the future. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. National annual average insurance savings by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive in 2020. Potential savings will vary.
Why would someone looking for a mortgage at the Jersey Shore take a loan from a company in Detroit or North Carolina or some other far-off place? Online mortgages promise a lot, but don't always deliver. First Bank of Sea Isle City knows the Jersey Shore. We are local lenders. We use local appraisers and provide in-house processing. We understand the unique obstacles of financing in Cape May County. Don't take a chance. Local banking is better. Let us guide you. First Bank of Sea Isle City.
Member FDIC. Equal housing lender.
You know your closet well, but what does it sound like? Yes, your closet. Does it whisper your taste? Does it scream your taste? The new Stitch Fix Freestyle, your personalized store, gets to know your unique style and fit. Its selection transforms to show you only the looks and trends you'll love. With a store that evolves alongside your taste, your closet will scream, "So you," without actually screaming. Introducing Stitch Fix Freestyle for women and men, your personalized store. We're so you.
Driving happy with Febreze car.
You're driving home when, oh no, you hit the longest red light in town. What's this? You're smiling because your car smells amazing. You just installed a Febreze car vent clip. 5 weeks ago. With up to 40 days of consistent Febreze scent, those lights can stay red for as long as they'd like.
Breathe happy, Febreze, la 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 la.
Love is in the air, and right now is a great time to shop for that special someone at Sage Jewelers on Tilton Road in Northfield. Sage Jewelers has only the best GIA certified diamonds in store and is currently offering 20 to 40% off jewelry store-wide. You can even take an extra 10% off diamond engagement rings. If you're looking to get engaged to the love of your life, treat her right by finding the perfect ring and having the experts at Sage help you every step of the way. Sage Jewelers, the real jeweler, on Tilton Road in Northfield and online at sagejewelers.com.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Game Night being brought to you by AC Airport. Plan your spring break getaway now. Create memories to last a lifetime with nonstop flights from Atlantic City to Cancun, San Juan, and Miami. Book your low-cost flight at spirit.com. We'll get to your messages in just a moment over on the text board at 609-403-0973. Also, you can DM the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle City. You know, before I get to your message, I want to bring this up real quick, and that is, if a Simmons-Harden deal doesn't get done in the next, 18, 20 hours, whatever the exact number is, until 3 p.m. tomorrow, I'm convinced that it won't get done because neither side is actually willing to take the risks necessary. And I would say shame on both of them. If you are a team in the Nets and you're serious about contending in the Eastern Conference, you don't have the supporting cast around your star players to do anything. So trading Harden is a great opportunity for you to make something happen for your roster that you can't do. Look what's going on with the Lakers right now. The Lakers barely have any salary cap space, any opportunity to better their roster. And LeBron James just said last night, they're not good enough. He said after the game. And Anthony Davis had a forlorn look on his face like, yeah, he's right. They're not good enough. And neither are the Nets. I don't care if you have Harden, Kyrie, and Durant for all 7 games of a series. I don't see a scenario where they beat Milwaukee right now. And I think even the Heat would take them 7 games. I don't know if this Nets team would beat the Suns, the Warriors in the NBA Finals. I just don't see how Sean Marks, the GM of the Nets, and Steve Nash, of the head coach of the Nets, can honestly say to anybody that they think a team is currently constructed is good enough. Joey D. and Ventnor chimes in, says, Josh, with all the pieces the Nets want in a trade for Harden, do you think it's better for the Sixers to wait until the offseason, keep the assets and Ben while getting Harden in free agency? As Joey D. and Ventnor. Couple things, Joey. One, if you wait for free agency, you're still in somewhat the same situation because you still have to trade Ben Simmons in a sign and trade deal with a team in your own conference. You lose some of the flexibility you would have right now because guys are going to be free agents. Guys are not going to be able to be traded. You can't trade an expiring contract, potentially like a Danny Green, in a situation like this. I think both sides lose a little leverage and lose a little flexibility. I think the keeping of assets thing is a little overrated at this point. If the Nets were saying, we demand a first-round pick, is that the craziest thing in the world? I mean, Harden is a league MVP. It's not like they're asking for Joel Embiid in return. You know, they want a first-round pick. I don't care about a first-round pick. Go ahead, give it to them. Now, the problem is that some people are reporting out there that what the Nets want is a package of Ben Simmons, Matisse Thybulle, Andre Drummond, and Seth Curry for James Harden and Patty Mills. And I feel like that's a lot. Drummond has too much value to this team at this point. And I think Thybulle with Ben Simmons going to Brooklyn will come back to bite you in the long run. You can't give them both guys. I would tell the Nets, Joey D, it's one or the other. You can't have both guys. And if I'm giving up Drummond, you got to give me Claxton in return. Like, part of the reason why the Sixers have invested what they have in Dwight Howard last year and Andre Drummond this year is because Joel Embiid gets injured or Joel Embiid gets in foul trouble like he got in the Dallas game recently. Who's going to play those minutes? Who's going to fill in for Joel Embiid? You need a guy who can play center. You know, if I'm talking to the Nets right now, I'm telling them, you can't ask me to give up all of that without me being able to find something to fill the void of Andre Drummond. The Thybulle thing it hurts, but it's not the end of the world. Seth Curry and Patty Mills feels like it's actually a downgrade for the Nets because for the Nets, Patty Mills is your primary ball handler without Harden and Kyrie on the floor. And if Kyrie still can't play half the games, who's going to be your primary ball handler? Patty Mills is a bona fide primary ball handling point guard-esque player. Seth Curry is not. And I feel like that would be a poor decision by the Nets. If I'm the Nets, I don't even offer Patty Mills. I say, look, I need Patty Mills. You want Javon Carter? I'll give you Javon Carter. But I'm not giving up Patty Mills. That feels like a very strange decision. You know, I ran the numbers earlier today. The Nets don't have to trade Patty Mills. You know, people are acting like, you know, some of this stuff is an absolute. Well, if you don't trade this guy, the deal can't work. And I'm just sitting here thinking, based on what information? I don't know what that information is. I think that, again, you have an issue here where I think both teams are negotiating to the very final minute to try to take advantage of the other. Now, maybe the Sixers, they can find another center out there, or they can find another shooter out there, or they can find somebody to kind of fill the void of some of those players that they would trade away. But, you know, as I told Mike Gill earlier on the Sports Bash today, the Nets supporting cast is absolute dreck outside of a couple of guys. LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin, they're just old. So is Paul Millsap, okay? Joe Harris has been injured most of the year. James Johnson is basically a poor man's Matisse Thybulle at this point. You've been starting guys like David Duke Jr. and DeAndre Bembry for games this year. You're hoping that Bruce Brown plays big minutes for you. Nick Claxton isn't even a real big man at this point. He's a tall, long dude, but he can be pushed around in the rebounding department. I don't understand why the Nets don't look at this as an opportunity to just upgrade their roster. Call another team. You know, get on the phone with Minnesota and be like, look, let's make a deal. You know what I mean? Get another team involved. Now, maybe that's what the situation is. Maybe what's holding up this deal is that the Sixers and the Nets are both trying to get other teams involved in a trade. But, you know, to answer Joey D's question directly, I don't mind giving up certain pieces, but I need assurances that what I'm giving up is going to get something else back in return. Because what the Sixers are missing right here, right now, is another star next to Embiid. You can't give up the other supporting cast pieces just because the Nets want them. You got to get something to fill the void in return. We'll see what happens. NBA trade deadline is tomorrow at 3 p.m. Of course, you listen to the Sport Bash with Mike Gill tomorrow with all the details in real time. And of course, we will be on Game Night to recap it all right here on 97.3 ESPN. Speaking of trades, the Flyers just weeks away from their trade deadline in the NHL, and Claude Giroux is looking more and more like he's going to be traded. To where and for how much? We'll get into all that coming up with our Flyers Insider Kevin Durso joining us next on Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. It's free. Thanks to First Bank of Seattle City.
It's Philadelphia Flyers hockey tonight on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app with Tim Saunders and Steve Coates calling all the play-by-play action.
The Flyers host the Detroit Red Wings.
Coverage begins at 7 p.m. It's Philadelphia Flyers hockey on the radio home of the Flyers in South Jersey, 97.3 ESPN, and listen live on the free mobile app.
Hey, big guy. Simple credibility approval.
Listen, big guy, try this. Give them more cash for their clunker.
That was my idea.
It's a President's Day sale all month. 0 down, 0.9% financing, 0 payments for 90 days, or $1,000 cash back. At Matt Blatt Kia, you could have it all. Plus, we want to get you out of that old car you hate. Come in today or visit us online and get the credit you deserve. 0.9% APR financing available for up to 60 months on new 2022 Kia Stinger, or get $1,000 cash back. Plus, Matt Blatt Kia in Toms River and Egg Harbor Township wants your trade, even if you owe thousands more than it's worth. Don't forget, you can't make a mistake with our 4-day love it or leave it return policy.
Gotta be a Matt Blatt Kia.
Offers with Truth Tier 1 or 2 credit through Kia Motors Finance. Not all will qualify. 0% based on 1516 for 1,000 borrowed. 1,000 off all 22 Stingers. Go to mattblattkianj.com for complete details. Expires 3/4/2022. Matt Blatt Kia, 6211 on the Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township, and now on Route 37 in Toms River.
New Spicy Lovers Pizza from Pizza Hut is here. With spicy marinara, sliced red chilies, and a fiery blend of herbs and crushed red pepper, your taste buds will thank you after they've cooled down. New Spicy Lovers Pizza. No one out-pizzas the Hut. Product availability and prices may vary. Exclusions apply.
Every 4 years, the world's greatest athletes compete for gold.
Team USA wins gold!
That time is now. The Winter Olympics are coming to NBC and Peacock.
Team USA would not be denied!
17 days of action, excitement, glory, and history in the making.
United States wins gold!
Don't miss a single epic moment. The Winter Olympics continue tonight on NBC and Peacock.
The 2022 Hercules Tires MAC Basketball Championships are headed to Atlantic City's Jim Whalen Boardwalk Hall, March 8th through 12th, featuring 22 men's and women's teams. The tournament is fun for the family, featuring a band jam, Spirit Squad showcase, and a mac and cheese fest, where you'll be able to taste a variety of mac and cheese from your favorite local restaurants. Don't miss your chance to be a part of the action, to see who will cut down the nets, and earn a spot in the big dance. Get your tickets at boardwalkhall.com.
Got a party of 10 coming in. We need to flip those 2 tables.
Leah's restaurant is fully booked night after night.
Section 3 is still behind.
She no longer has reservations about finally finding a hostess.
Why doesn't 23 have menus? Oh, because they're in my hand.
Indeed can help her hire great people fast.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. Instant Match instantly connects you with quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your sponsored job description. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey, Ray Magliozzi here. Have you ever cooked a really fine gourmet meal? Yeah, me neither. But I'm told it all comes down to the ingredients. And when I need ingredients to improve my car, the place I go is eBay Motors. Whether you roasted your last transmission, graded your current floor mat, or pureed your side view mirror on a lamppost, eBay Motors has the right parts at the right prices. 122 million of them. And by the way, if you recently fired up your grill, don't worry, eBay Motors has grills too. eBay Motors. Let's ride.
Hear ye, hear ye. Thanks for coming to the town square. First, I'd like to tell you about Steve. He's a plumber. I hear he does good work. Also, Tim. He's this new thing called a dentist. Oh, and Monica, she has a new vegan restaurant. I didn't even know that was a thing yet. Anyway, if you need those things, just wander around town and try to find them because the internet hasn't been invented yet, so I don't know.
This isn't the olden days. Now, word of mouth has gone online. At Town Square, South Jersey, we can show you how to harness the power of your existing word of mouth and amplify it online. Go to townsquarelocal.com for a free local customer analysis where you can see how many local customers in South Jersey you could reach online. Visit townsquarelocal.com and be the Town Square today. That's townsquarelocal.com.
Ever have questions about your prescriptions, even in the middle of the night? Well, Walgreens now offers Pharmacy Chat 24/7, so you can ask an expert about things like the correct dosage of your medications or possible side effects. Speaking of side effects, the side effect of getting your questions answered at 2 a.m.? Sleeping much easier for the next 6 hours. Try Pharmacy Chat today or tonight, online or on the Walgreens app.
The uh-ohs are out there. Scratches, dents, unexpected natural events. But with Mako and their magic, your car is no longer tragic. So when life throws you uh-ohs, just say,
better get Mako.
And go to Mako.com to book your appointment today.
Football fans, the weekend you've waited for is finally here. Put your game face on to make sure your game day picks are perfect with the best wings, ears, and tails in South Jersey. All from the Piccalilli Inn on Route 206 in Chemung. For generations, the Piccalilli has been #1 for the big game. Try any of their homestyle favorites and find out why. Visit them on Facebook or at Piccalilli.com for their Pick Picks Big Game Specials. And be sure to pre-order to guarantee your spot in Sunday's lineup.
The Piccalilli Inn. Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Flyers back on the ice tonight, taking on the Red Wings. You can hear all the action right here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. We'll get to our Flyers insider Kevin Durso in just a moment. Real quick, Dan and EHT chimes in and says, my feeling is the Sixers get Harden now. They're in a championship window beyond this year. I'm not so sure. Similar to when they acquired Butler. Not the same thing I understand, but if Harden seems depleted, they could trade him again, question mark. Real quick, Dan and EHT, here's the thing. Remember, Butler didn't stay because the Sixers chose Ben Simmons and Brett Brown over him. And then they had to give the money to somebody, and they gave the free agency money to Tobias Harris and later Al Horford. I think the Harden situation, I understand where you're going. It's not similar to Butler because of the fact that I think Harden won't have the distraction of whose ball is it, whose team is it situation going on here. Speaking of trades, the NHL All-Star Game MVP was Claude Giroux, the Flyers captain. The NHL trade deadline is just weeks away. So could we see Giroux traded? How soon, to where, and for what? Well, that's the Kevin Durso right now as the Flyers are back on the ice from the All-Star break, taking on the Red Wings tonight. Kevin, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Josh. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I put it out on Twitter on Saturday night. You know, I mean it in part tongue-in-cheek, but I also mean it probably seriously. I mean, did Giroux winning the All-Star Game MVP help his trade value?
I'm sure it did a little bit because if nothing else, what you did get to see at an event like that on a national stage is a guy who was actually, was having a lot of fun. He was playing around some talented individuals, obviously, and kind of noted it was a little weird to be playing alongside a guy like Jake Gensel, who's a member of the Pittsburgh Penguins, and calling him a teammate for a game. But he went out and had a really good performance and was playing with a lot of really talented people. And as such, it makes it kind of fun, and it kind of takes your mind off the situation that you're currently in when you're playing for a team that's in the position that the Flyers are. So I do think it does raise his value a little bit because certainly, and I wrote about this in an article the next day on Sunday on 97.3 ESPN.com, they, listening to some of the things that were being said around the league by other people as, Giroux wins the MVP, what Rod Brindamore has to say about him, what a guy like defenseman Zach Werenski from Columbus has to say about him. There was a kind of just a sentiment going around about how Giroux stepped into that leadership role that, he was the captain of that Metro team and kind of basically set the tone for it and trying to win that event, even though it's, there's no point value to it. And it's just an event for fun for the most part. There's some money on the line, obviously, but all that considered, I think that his competitive edge kind of comes up too. So I think a lot of people see that And if that's the last national event that you see Claude Giroux play in as a member of the Flyers, then certainly it's a great way for him to go out because it embodied a lot of the way that he is, the way his personality is, kind of quietly this type of guy who is extremely competitive. And we don't always hear him as a rah-rah kind of guy, but he is that competitive guy. And I think that everybody got to see that one more time on a national stage. And now it's about what's next for him.
So with that being said, all those superlatives you just threw out there, who are teams around the league that those qualities, those attributes would appeal to enough for them to actually make a trade for Giroux?
Yeah, that's a tough question kind of, to answer right now because of the fact that there's a lot of factors that go into making a trade at this point. If you're strictly focusing on what Giroux brings to a team, then anybody who's in playoff contention should have interest. I mean, anybody who can add a player like that to their roster for the playoff push should absolutely have interest. But there's always going to be some other factors that come into play, specifically the money of it. How do you make the salary work with the way that the salary cap is and the way that some of these teams are? When you think about these other teams that are out there, you're going to hear many similar names come up as the deadline approaches. Colorado, Minnesota's kind of a dark horse. Boston's going to be a name that you hear a little bit. Teams of that nature. As you hear them come up, the question is also going to become, can they afford to acquire a player like Claude Giroux? What would they have to give up to make that work? And is there an amount of money that the Flyers can retain that would make that easier and help make that process go a little further? So those are questions that need to be answered down the line. And certainly as teams decide on what they want to do, there's an element of it too where timing comes into play. If Giroux is somebody who can, essentially has moved a lot earlier than we expect, several games before the deadline, then teams have to make that money work immediately. But there's other teams out there that could also sit there and say, you know what, I don't want to wait until the deadline to make my significant move. So I'm not waiting on whenever the Flyers move Claude Giroux. I'm going to wait and I'm going to jump ahead of that and make a trade for somebody else. And it takes them out of play because they no longer have the money and the cap space to make it work. So we will see how that goes. But ultimately, Giroux's going to have multiple suitors. There's no question about that. And certainly if, since he kind of holds the keys to that deal, since he has the no trade clause and would have to waive that to go anywhere, he has a little bit of control in where he ends up going. And that's going to play a factor as well.
I know that we don't know exactly what Giroux does and doesn't want explicitly, but what is a fair return on investment? You know what I mean? That a Flyer fan can expect, because Kevin, we just spent all week talking about the Ben Simmons situation, right? Ben Simmons is a 3-time NBA All-Star, a 2-time NBA defensive first teamer, right? So you have a situation where in basketball, we're talking all week with the deadline tomorrow. Well, Ben Simmons, what is he worth? What is Claude Giroux worth? What is a fair return on trade that the Flyer fan can legitimately expect?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways you can look at this, because another key factor when you're looking at anybody who's available at the trade deadline is kind of competition in terms of who else is available. And quite frankly, I don't know that there's going to be many, if anybody at all, really, who has the amount of experience and credentials that Giroux has at the deadline. Just the elements of his experience level, his production over the years. You're talking about a guy who's going to reach his 1,000th game very soon here in another 15 games, and is on track to have 900 points at that time. So he's basically near a point per game pace throughout his entire career. And you don't find people like that very often at the deadline. So when you can get one like that, it becomes a tougher competition. So, for me, if I'm the one who's in that chair and if I'm in Chuck Fletcher's shoes right now and I got to make a deal, for me, it's got to start with a first-round pick. You've got to go out and try to get a first-round pick somewhere in this deal. And I don't know if it's going to be, something where you want to try to go crazy with it and get it this year. Next year's draft is said to be better than this year's draft. Maybe you target a 2023 first-round pick, so you've got some leverage in that draft. But I don't think that's where you stop with either draft picks or return, because you're going to want something else that's going to have part of a future, whether it's a 2022 pick in the middle round, whether it's a prospect. You've got some options there. And then I think that there's also going to be an element in any deal where there's going to be somebody who kind of comes back as a throw-in piece of that deal, where it's a guy who's actively playing on an NHL roster. And that can be for a couple reasons. That can be to make money work. That can be to make it more of a fair return in the Flyers' eyes, or vice versa. Those are things that kind of need to be considered. But I think you're going to see, if Giroux is moved, I think at the very least you're going to see an active NHL player on the move in return, and I think you're going to see a first-round pick either this year or next year involved in the deal. And if it turns out to be for next year, don't be surprised if there's either another pick or a prospect thrown in as well. I think that would be very fair for the type of player that Drew is, for what he brings to a team that's in the playoffs, and for what he's done for this franchise over the years in terms of being basically the top performer year in and year out. So I think that's where you kind of set your sights moving forward.
Flyers Insider Kevin Durso joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Flyers return from the All-Star break tonight versus the Red Wings. You hear all the action coming up at 7 p.m. here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Kevin, you know, the team they're playing tonight is a team that ever since they had their run of success, they just haven't been able to get it right. How do the Flyers moving forward avoid being the next Detroit Red Wings?
Well, I think an easy way to avoid it is to start the process that the Red Wings have done really well for the last several years as soon as possible, and that's getting prospects in that have bright futures. And in a lot of cases, those have been picks that are made pretty high in the draft. You know, you're not necessarily the best team in the league for a little while, but you're going to draft talent. And, you know, I can look up and down this Detroit lineup right now, and there's multiple players that you can look at who are picked in the top 10 of drafts over the years, whether we're talking about, you know, and I mean, their headliner is still Dylan Larkin, who's been around for a little while, but you're seeing him alongside of guys like Philip Zadina, Lucas Raymond, who was a recent pick of theirs, Morris Siders on the blue line, and that's another guy who just continues to rise through and starts to get more of a significant role and be one of their top producers. And let's be real about this. That's got them as a team right now. You know, they're probably not going to make the playoffs this year because every position in the Eastern Conference is pretty well accounted for at this point. But there's a good chance they could be the first team out of the playoffs. And that's saying a lot for where they've been over the years. They're very close to becoming a playoff team. If somebody that's ahead of them right now that makes the playoffs this year, if somebody slips up, they could make the playoffs as soon as next year. And that's the way to build it. It's to get high-end talent. And I would encourage, if anybody, you know, for people who are watching this game tonight and are following along as they have typically throughout the year, you know, watch the way Detroit plays this game, because they've got a lot of speed and they've got a lot of skill, and you'll see that with a lot of these young players. And I wouldn't be surprised if one or more of those three names that I mentioned, guys like Zadina, Raymond, and Sider, if they're contributors to whatever Detroit is able to produce tonight. So that's the method that, to me, I think works. And, you know, you've heard it from Chuck Fletcher already. You know, Danny Briere said it again today. Lacking high-end talent and lacking high-end producers that are game-changing and can just go in there and be difference makers. That's the word that Briere used today. And I think that that's a very fair way to look at it. And I think that if you look at the Detroit Red Wings right now, you're seeing more than a few difference makers down the road for this team as they continue in their development, as they get older, as they get more experience. And I think that's going to go a long way for not only how far they've already come to this point in the season and how close they could be to being a playoff team, but where they go in the next, say, 5 years, because they've got some really good groundwork laid to go and take big steps in the near future.
Follow him on Twitter at Kevin_Durso on Twitter for your Flyers and NHL coverage. Also over at 97.3 ESPN.com, all of his written coverage as well. Flyers take on the Red Wings tonight, coming up next here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Kevin, appreciate you jumping on. Enjoy the game today, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Josh Hennig back here in the Matt Black Kia studios here on 97.3 ESPN. A lot of great stuff there from Kevin Durso. And I thought the one thing he mentioned is that if teams start competing with each other to acquire Giroux, that could be a situation where the Flyers really benefit. And that concept to me is interesting because, like I said earlier in the show, you know, in all week we've been talking about Ben Simmons, James Harden, the NBA trade deadline. Well, the Flyers have a guy with an incredible resume, a resume that, as you heard Kevin say, is going to be the best guy available on the trade market. So could the Flyers force teams into a bidding war and they benefit from it? It'll be interesting to see. It's been a while since the Flyers had a guy that teams, you know, were clamoring over to acquire, because usually the Flyers are competitive or they have a roster that nobody really wants anybody on. So a very interesting situation for the Flyers. We'll keep an eye on it over at 97.3 ESPN.com and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. NBA trade deadline tomorrow at 3 p.m. Mike Gill and Sports Bash will have it covered, and I'll recap it tomorrow night at 6 here on 97.3 ESPN.